The studio lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and millions of people were watching live. No one expected anything unusual to happen that night. It was supposed to be a normal television moment, a short family segment, a few smiles, polite applause, and then a commercial break. But what happened instead stopped everything. The host smiled and turned to a young boy standing beside Jonathan Roumie. "Go ahead," the host said gently. "You can speak." The boy swallowed hard. His hands trembled slightly as he held the microphone. He looked too young to carry any kind of message, especially one that would soon shake hearts across the world. There was a pause. Then he spoke. What he said about Jesus was not loud. It was not dramatic. But it was real. And the moment those words left his mouth, the entire atmosphere in the studio changed. The host's smile slowly faded. The audience leaned forward in their seats. Jonathan Roumie's eyes filled with tears. This wasn't acting. This wasn't planned. This wasn't a script. It was a child, speaking truth on live television. Within seconds, the control room went quiet. Producers stared at their monitors, unsure whether to cut away, but something told them not to. Something told them this moment was bigger than television. Across the world, people watching from their homes felt it too. Some paused their conversations. Some turned up the volume. Some felt a sudden lump in their throat, without even knowing why. Because what the boy was about to say didn't sound like something learned from a book. It sounded like something lived in a world full of noise, arguments, and opinions about faith. This was different. There was no debate, no pressure, no preaching, just honesty. And honesty has a way of reaching places arguments never can. Moments later, social media would explode. Clips would be shared millions of times. Comments would pour in from people saying the same thing. I don't know why, but this made me cry. I wasn't even looking for this. I felt God again. But right now, in that exact second, none of them knew what was coming next. Because the next sentence from that child would remind millions of people who Jesus truly is. Earlier that day, nothing about the schedule suggested that history was about to happen. The television studio buzzed with routine activity. Technicians adjusting microphones, producers checking cue cards, assistants whispering countdowns. It was just another broadcast in a long list of daily programs, timed segments, controlled conversations, carefully planned moments. Jonathan Roumie arrived quietly, dressed simply, greeting crew members with warm smiles and handshakes. To many in the room, he was a familiar face, the man known around the world for portraying Jesus in The Chosen. To others, he was just another guest on the call sheet, but to millions watching at home, he represented something much deeper. For years, people had written to him, thanking him. Some said his performance brought them back to faith. Others said it helped them forgive, heal, or believe again after long seasons of doubt. Jonathan carried those stories with humility, never claiming ownership of what he believed belonged to God. That day, the interview was meant to focus on that journey, acting, responsibility, and how playing such a sacred role had changed his life. The host welcomed him warmly. Applause filled the studio. The conversation flowed easily. Jonathan spoke thoughtfully about faith, about the weight of portraying Jesus, about remembering that he was only a vessel, never the message itself. The audience nodded along. Everything felt safe, predictable. Then the conversation shifted. The host glanced at a cue card, then smiled again. The kind of smile that signals a lighter moment. "We hear you're very close to your family," the host said. Jonathan nodded. "Very much so." And today, the host continued, "You brought someone special with you." The camera slowly panned. Standing just off to the side was a young boy, Jonathan Roumie's nephew. He hadn't been part of the original plan, at least not in any meaningful way. He was simply there to watch, to support, to sit quietly behind the scenes. A child in an adult world of lights, cameras, and expectations. He wore a plain shirt, no fancy clothes, no confidence trained by media coaching. Just a child, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, eyes wide as he looked around the massive studio. Jonathan glanced toward him and smiled. Not the smile of a celebrity, but the smile of an uncle. The host noticed. "Well," the host said playfully, "since he's here, why don't we bring him out?" A ripple of soft laughter moved through the audience. The boy hesitated. Jonathan leaned toward him and whispered something. No one heard what it was, but the boy nodded slowly. He walked forward. Each step looked heavy, not because of fear, but because children feel things deeply. They sense when moments matter, even if they don't fully understand why. A stage assistant handed him a microphone. It felt large in his hands. The audience smiled kindly. Some expected a cute exchange. Others expected nothing more than a short, forgettable moment before the show moved on. The host crouched slightly to be at eye level with him. "Don't worry," the host said softly. "Just speak from your heart." The boy looked at Jonathan. Jonathan nodded again, calm, reassuring, silent. The cameras zoomed in. Somewhere in the control room, a producer checked the clock, already thinking about timing. This wasn't supposed to be a big moment. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't designed to go viral. But sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones no one plans for. The host took a breath and asked a simple question, the kind asked without much thought. "So," the host said gently, "what does Jesus mean to you?" There it was, a question so simple that adults answer it with long explanations, and children answer it with truth. The studio grew quiet. The boy didn't answer right away. He looked down at the microphone, then up at the lights, then straight into the camera. In that pause, that small, sacred silence, something shifted. No one knew it yet, but the world was about to listen. The question hung in the air. "So, what does Jesus mean to you?" It was simple, almost casual. The kind of question that usually gets a quick answer before the show moves on. But this time, nothing moved forward. The boy didn't speak. Seconds passed. In live television, silence feels louder than sound. Every pause stretches. Every breath becomes noticeable. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer shifted uncomfortably in their chair. The clock on the monitor kept counting down, unaware that time itself seemed to slow inside the studio. The audience waited. The boy looked down at the microphone again. His fingers tightened around it, then loosened. He wasn't searching for the right words. He was searching for courage. Jonathan Roumie watched quietly, his face calm but his eyes attentive. He didn't step in. He didn't interrupt. He trusted the moment. The host remained still, offering no pressure, no rescue, just space. The boy lifted his head. His eyes met the camera, not with confidence, but with sincerity. The kind that doesn't know how to perform, only how to be honest. He took a breath. Then another. You could hear it in the studio. He began. Then stopped. A few people in the audience smiled gently, expecting nerves to take over. Children get shy. That's normal. Everyone understood, but something about the boy's expression said this wasn't fear. It was weight. He was carrying something real. He swallowed and tried again. "When people talk about Jesus," he said softly, "they usually talk about church or rules or stories." The host's eyebrows lifted slightly. The audience leaned in. "But for me," the boy continued, "he's not far away." Jonathan's posture changed almost imperceptibly, but enough. The boy paused again, as if choosing each word carefully, like fragile glass. "There were nights," he said, "when I was scared and didn't know what to do." A hush fell over the room, no cameras, no people, just me. The studio lights felt suddenly too bright for something this personal. "And I talked to him," the boy said, "not out loud, just in my heart." The audience sat frozen. "I didn't know fancy prayers," he continued. "I just said what I felt." He looked down again, then back up. "And every time," he said, his voice steady, now, "I felt like I wasn't alone anymore." Jonathan lowered his head. The host's mouth parted slightly, forgetting their next line. The boy wasn't speaking like someone repeating something he'd been taught. He was speaking like someone remembering something he'd lived. He didn't always fix things right away, the boy said, but he stayed. That word landed heavier than the rest. Stayed, in a world full of leaving. That single word echoed. Somewhere in the audience, a woman wiped her eyes. Another clasped their hands together, without realizing it. "He stayed when I was afraid," the boy continued. "He stayed when I didn't understand things, and he stayed when I felt small." The boy's shoulders relaxed. Whatever fear he'd carried at the beginning was gone now. In its place was something stronger, truth. "I know my uncle plays Jesus on television," he said, glancing briefly toward Jonathan. "And he does a really good job." Soft laughter rippled through the audience, a gentle release of tension. "But the real Jesus," the boy said, turning back to the camera, "isn't on a screen." The laughter faded instantly. "He's with you," the boy said, "even when no one else is." The studio felt different now, not like a show. Like a moment that didn't belong to television at all. The host forgot the camera was live. Jonathan forgot the audience was there. This wasn't rising tension anymore. It was something deeper, conviction. And the boy wasn't finished yet. He took one last breath and prepared to say the line that would change everything. The boy paused, not because he was unsure anymore, but because he understood the weight of what he was about to say. The studio was so quiet that even the hum of the lights felt loud. No one shifted in their seat, no one whispered. It was the kind of silence that only appears when people sense they are standing on sacred ground. The boy looked straight into the camera, and then he spoke. "Jesus isn't just someone my uncle plays." The words landed softly, but they landed deep. "He's not a character," the boy continued. "He's not a story I only hear about on Sundays." The boy's voice didn't shake now. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "He's the reason I'm not afraid," the boy said. Something broke open in the room, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. "He's the reason I can sleep at night," the boy continued. "Even when my mind won't stop thinking, even when I don't understand why things happen." The host swallowed hard. "He listens," the boy said. "Not like people listen while they wait to talk, but like he really hears." A few heads in the audience nodded without realizing it. "And when I mess up," the boy went on, "he doesn't walk away." His fingers tightened around the microphone for a moment. "I know people who left," he said. "Friends, even grown. Ups, sometimes they say they'll stay, but then they don't." The room felt heavier now. "But Jesus stays," the boy said again. "Even when I'm not brave, even when I'm wrong, even when I don't know how to explain myself." That word returned. Stayed tears slid silently down Jonathan's face. He didn't wipe them away. The boy took a breath and continued. "I think people think you have to be important for Jesus to care," he said. "Like you have to be famous, or good all the time, or know all the answers." He shook his head gently. "But I'm just a kid," he said, "and he still listens to me." A quiet sob came from somewhere in the audience. "He doesn't laugh when I'm scared," the boy said. "He doesn't rush me. He doesn't tell me I'm too small." The camera slowly zoomed in. Not because a producer ordered it, but because instinct took over. This was the moment. Everyone felt it. "When I talk to him," the boy said, "I don't feel alone anymore." The host's eyes were wet now. No attempt was made to hide it, and that's why, the boy continued, "I'm not afraid to talk about him here." The word "here" echoed, on live television, in front of millions. "Because if he can stay with me in the quiet," the boy said, "then he can reach people in loud places too." A long pause followed. No applause, no movement. Just stillness. Then the boy added one final sentence, softer than the rest, but stronger than all of them. "Jesus loves people even when they don't believe he does." That was it. The moment broke wide open. The host covered their mouth, unable to speak. Jonathan bowed his head fully now, shoulders trembling. Audience members wiped tears openly. No embarrassment, no restraint. This wasn't religion being explained. This was faith being witnessed. The boy stood there, unaware of the magnitude of what had just happened. To him, he had only spoken what was true. He looked at Jonathan. Jonathan looked back, eyes full, heart overwhelmed. The boy smiled. A small smile, an innocent one, like his job was done. The host finally found their voice, but it cracked immediately. "Thank you," they said quietly. "Thank you for sharing that." The boy nodded and stepped back. But the room didn't return to normal, because something had shifted, not just in the studio, but far beyond it. In living rooms, in hospital rooms, in cars parked outside homes where people sat longer than they planned, unable to turn the television off. People who hadn't prayed in years felt something stir. People who thought faith was complicated suddenly felt it wasn't. A child had just said what sermons sometimes fail to say, that Jesus is present, that he listens, that he stays, and the world had heard it, live, for several seconds. After the boy stepped back, no one spoke. Live television is never supposed to feel like this. There are usually cues, applause signs, commercial breaks waiting on a countdown, but none of that mattered now. The studio was suspended in something deeper than programming. The host sat frozen, hands resting on the desk, eyes still glistening. Words had completely left them. This wasn't a moment to transition. It wasn't a moment to fill. It was a moment to honor. Finally, the host took a breath. Thank you, they said again, softer than before. That was beautiful. The audience applauded, but not loudly. Not the kind of applause meant to entertain. It was slow, respectful, almost reverent, like people were clapping to say we felt that. Jonathan Roumie stood and gently placed a hand on his nephew's shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The emotion on his face said more than words ever could. As the show moved toward its next segment, something strange happened. No one moved on. The cameras kept rolling, but the energy had changed. Crew members behind the scenes wiped their eyes. A producer removed their headset just for a moment, overwhelmed. The clock ticked forward, but the room felt timeless. And then, the show cut to commercial. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Within minutes, clips of the moment began appearing online. Someone in the audience had recorded it on their phone. A staff member shared a short clip. A viewer clipped the live broadcast and posted it with one simple caption. This child just said more about Jesus in 1 minute than most people do in a lifetime. The internet responded instantly. Comments poured in. I wasn't ready for this. I'm crying at work. I don't even go to church, but this hit me. My faith feels alive again. The clip crossed platforms, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Millions of views stacked up faster than anyone could count. People shared it not with arguments or explanations, but with hearts and prayer emojis. Pastors shared it from pulpits the following Sunday. Parents sent it to their children. Children sent it to their parents. A woman commented, I lost my husband last year. When he said, he stays, I felt like God was talking directly to me. A man wrote, I've been angry at God for years. This didn't answer my questions, but it reminded me he's still there. That was the power of it. The boy didn't explain theology. He didn't debate belief. He didn't try to convince anyone. He simply testified, and testimony travels farther than argument ever could. Jonathan Roumie later spoke briefly about the moment in a short post. He didn't promote himself. He didn't analyze it. He wrote just one sentence, God speaks through the humble. That post went viral too. Interview requests came flooding in. But the family declined most of them. They wanted to protect the boy. This moment didn't belong to media cycles or headlines. It belonged to hearts. Still, the impact continued. People began recreating the clip, adding soft music, subtitles, translations. It reached countries where the show had never aired. Languages the boy didn't speak. Cultures he had never seen. And somehow, the message still landed, because truth doesn't need translation. In churches, leaders noticed something unusual. People weren't talking about the boy's confidence. They weren't talking about Jonathan Roumie's fame. They were talking about Jesus staying. That one word returned again and again, stayed. In comment sections, in sermons, in private prayers. People who felt abandoned remembered they weren't. People who felt small realized they were seen. People who had stopped believing God cared felt something gently knock at the door of their heart again. All because a child spoke honestly on live television. The world is loud. Opinions shout. Arguments compete. Voices try to dominate. But that day, the loudest thing was a quiet truth spoken without force, and it reached millions. Not because it was polished, but because it was real. The days that followed felt different. Not louder, not dramatic, just quieter, in a meaningful way. After the viral wave settled, something deeper remained. The clip stopped trending eventually, as all things online do. New headlines replaced it. New stories demanded attention. But for many people, the words spoken by that child did not fade, they stayed. In homes across the world, people replayed the moment late at night, when the house was quiet and thoughts grew heavy. Some watched it alone, headphones in, letting the words sink deeper each time. He stays. That sentence began to echo in places where fear lived. A young woman battling anxiety replayed it before bed. A father sitting in his car after a long shift replayed it before going inside. A teenager struggling with doubt replayed it in secret, unsure why it made their chest feel lighter. No one announced miracles. No one claimed instant change, but something softened. Jonathan Roumie returned to his routine quietly. He didn't chase interviews or attention. When asked about the moment later, he spoke gently and briefly. "That wasn't about me," he said. "That was about truth spoken without fear." At home, life returned to normal. The boy went back to school. Homework, friends, ordinary days. He didn't fully understand why adults kept thanking him, or why strangers sent letters saying his words had helped them pray again. To him, nothing extraordinary had happened. He had just answered a question, honestly. And maybe that's what made it extraordinary. Church leaders noticed something unusual in the weeks that followed. People weren't asking complicated questions. They weren't demanding answers to every mystery of faith. They were asking simpler things. How do I talk to God? Does He really listen? Can I still come to Him even if I don't have everything figured out? The answers felt easier now, because a child had shown them how. Not with perfection, not with confidence, but with honesty. In one small church, a pastor played the clip during a service. When it ended, no sermon followed. The pastor simply said, "Let's sit with that." And people did. Some cried quietly. Some held hands, some just breathed in another place. A teacher played the clip for students during a discussion about faith and fear. A student raised their hand and said, "If Jesus stays when we're scared, maybe I don't have to hide mine." Something unlocked. The boy's words didn't give people answers. They gave them permission. Permission to be small, permission to be unsure, permission to believe that faith doesn't require strength, only openness. That was the resolution no one expected. There was no dramatic ending, no public apology, no stage-lit conclusion, just quiet change. And maybe that's how real impact always works. Months later, Jonathan was asked one final question during a separate interview. "What did that moment teach you?" He paused, then smiled softly. "That God doesn't need our platforms," he said. "He just needs our willingness." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved. The boy was never brought back on television for another segment. There was no follow-up performance, no attempt to recreate the moment, because moments like that can't be repeated. They can only be remembered. And lived. Somewhere, someone watched that clip for the first time long after the hype had passed. No comments, no shares, just quiet attention. And in that quiet moment, something stirred again, not because of production value, not because of celebrity, but because truth, once spoken, never really disappears. It waits, and when someone is ready, it finds them. The child had gone back to being just a child, but the message had already done its work. It had settled into hearts. It had reminded people that faith doesn't need to be loud to be strong, and that Jesus doesn't leave when the cameras turn off. He stays, long after the cameras stopped rolling, long after the clip stopped trending, long after the world moved on to the next story. One truth remained, not flashy, not loud, not complicated, just steady. The world often tells us that faith must be defended with arguments, proven with knowledge, or displayed through perfection. It tells us that you must be confident, educated, or powerful for your voice to matter. But that moment on live television told a different story. A child stood under bright lights, holding a microphone too big for his hands, and reminded millions of people of something they had forgotten. Faith begins where honesty lives. He didn't quote scripture to impress anyone. He didn't preach. He didn't perform. He simply spoke what he knew. And what he knew was this, that Jesus listens, that Jesus stays, that Jesus is near, even when the world feels far away. That's the part that stayed with people. Not the setting, not the celebrity, not the viral numbers. The message, because deep down, most people aren't asking for answers to every mystery of life. They're asking something much simpler. Am I alone? Am I still seen? Do I still matter, even when I'm afraid, confused, or tired? And in one quiet moment, a child answered those questions without even realizing it. He showed the world that faith doesn't grow louder by shouting. It grows deeper by being real. The moral of this story isn't about television. It isn't about fame. It isn't even about going viral. It's about humility. Because humility creates space for truth to enter, the boy didn't try to be important. And because of that, his words became important. He didn't try to be strong, and because of that, his faith felt strong. That's the paradox the world often misses. Strength isn't found in having everything together. It's found in trusting even when you don't. And that's why this moment reached so many hearts, because people recognized themselves in it. They saw their own fears, their own doubts, their own quiet prayers whispered late at night, and they realized something comforting. If Jesus listens to a child speaking from the heart, then maybe he's listening to me too. That's the kind of faith that doesn't fade when circumstances change. That's the kind of faith that stays when explanations fall short. And that's why this story mattered. Not because it proved something, but because it reminded people of something. That faith is not about being impressive. It's about being present. That Jesus doesn't wait for us to become better before he draws near. He comes close right where we are, in the noise of the world. Voices compete for attention every day. But sometimes the voice that changes everything is the one that speaks gently, with no agenda, no pride, no fear of being small. And when that happens, something beautiful takes place. Hearts open, walls soften, hope returns. So if this story reached you, not emotionally, but personally, then let it stay with you. Let it remind you that your voice matters, even if it shakes. That your faith counts, even if it's quiet. And that humility is not weakness. It's strength under control. Because true power doesn't demand attention. It earns trust. And true faith doesn't need a spotlight. It shines on its own. If this message touched your heart, type Amen in the comments. If you believe humility is real strength, type faith. And tell us where you're watching from. Because no matter where you are, this message was meant to find you.